When I was a kid, I went to church every single week, and I thought the only time the pastor worked was on Sunday. Turns out that's not true. I've been a pastor for 15 years, and it is a lot of work. In this video, I'm going to talk about why it's so vital for us pastors to take time off and for our staffs and our volunteers to also get time off as well. But particularly for you, if you're a pastor watching this, I want to help you try to think through how can you better utilize time off every week and also throughout the year. My name is Lane Sebring. This is Preaching Donkey. If you haven't yet got my free guide to creating killer sermons, you can go to preachingdonkey.com/21days and pick up your guide there. Just recently, my church did something that we do every single year. At the end of the year, between Christmas and New Year's, we shut down for an entire week. Now, prior to this, we work really hard throughout December. We have a lot going on. We have different events. We have Christmas Eve services that are actually for 3 straight days. And it is a lot of work. And in a lot of times, not only are we doing our own events, but we're also doing community Christmas parades and other things like that. And sometimes we're even building out a new campus. So every December is a pretty intense month, and November is as well. So at the end of the year, once our Christmas Eve services are over, we shut down from December 25th through January 1st, and we don't go back until January 2nd. And so I am on that break right now because today, as I'm recording this, it's December 30th. And so I've been able to just kind of reflect and rest and spend time with my family, and it's been really nice. And it got me thinking about how important and how vital it is for pastors to have intentional breaks and intentional time of Sabbath. Because the pastor profession is actually pretty stressful. Most people don't realize this, but pastors give of themselves a lot. They give kind of everything they have in most situations that they're in. And it can be very taxing mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually when you've got the pressures of being in ministry. For one thing, everybody's looking at you to be the example. And you know deep down inside that you don't have what it takes to be the example to everybody because you're not Jesus. You didn't die on a cross for their sin. You're not the one who came to redeem mankind. You're just a guy. You're just a person. You're just someone who is trying to do the best that you can to fulfill the calling that you've been given. But you still have an expectation placed on you to be perfect. And when you fell short of that, people don't like it. They get disappointed when you don't measure up to whatever standard they've set for themselves. And then in addition to that, there are biblical standards that we as pastors have to meet that Paul outlines in Timothy and Titus. And so there's all kinds of things that just kind of add to the pressure of this situation. Not to mention the fact that if you want to be impactful to people, you got to be in their lives, you got to be in the mix. And so sometimes it can be difficult to separate how much people want of you versus how much you can give. And so people are always coming to you, and typically people don't come by the church just to let you know that things are going well and everything's fine and they're happy. They typically come by the church to let you know that they're falling apart or they need something or they are desperate or they need resources or they need time or energy or effort. And so all that can go back to you, and you can feel that pressure of, I've got to be there for these people. And in addition to that, if you preach, I think there's a reason why Paul says that pastors are worthy of double honor, especially those who labor in preaching and teaching, because it is very laborious to prepare sermons every single week and to preach them. That is a lot of work. And so if that's the cycle that you have, it's no wonder that pastors leave the ministry very often due to burnout, because they just get to the point where they say, I can't take this anymore and I'm done. In fact, throughout the years, there's been different statistics and different findings, but it is unreal and alarming how many pastors leave the ministry every month around the world and here in North America due to burnout or due to depression or due to emotional strain and anxiety connected to their work. Now, does that mean that being in ministry is bad and you just shouldn't do it? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just acknowledging that it's not easy work and it can be very taxing. And if you're not a pastor and never been a pastor, it's really hard for you to understand the nuance of it, because from the outside looking in, you're going, well, what do? I mean, you just get up and write a sermon and talk about it, and then most of the time you're just kind of hanging out. Like, it's hard to explain to people. Even when people ask me, what do you do? It's hard to explain. I do a little bit of everything, and yet I'm sometimes at a loss for words for how to explain it. Now, pastors, I don't feel like we should act like we're martyrs. I think that we have one of the coolest jobs in the world. That we get to do this is pretty amazing, and I'm grateful for it. But I want to also just acknowledge the reality that it can be very draining when people get upset with you, when they leave your church, when there's people who leave your church en masse, and you know that maybe they're talking about you and they won't deal with it with you in person. There's all kinds of stressors related to that. That can be very hurtful. When staff decide to leave, or when people are upset with you about things that are out of your control, or you're misunderstood. These definitely happen in all different professions. However, when you're a pastor, it is who you are. You bring it home with you. You take it with you everywhere you go. You can't separate yourself from the work. It's not like you are a job where you clock out at 5 o'clock and you go home and that's it. And you can just kind of check out until you go back the next day. Your work is going to follow you home. And so there are definitely other professions like this. I'm not saying pastors are unique in this situation, but I'm talking to you as a pastor, and I just want to first acknowledge and encourage it is a difficult thing to do, to be in ministry as your profession. Add to that the fact that some of you I know are bivocational or trivocational, meaning that yes, you're a pastor, and yes, you also have a full-time job, and you may have a part-time job on top of that. And so the stressors in your life are even more, because there's no such thing as a part-time pastor. Your church is going to still expect you to be there for them when they most need it. And even though the pay might be part-time, the expectations are often full-time. And so with all that, you have to take a break and you have to be intentional about it. The problem is, this is where most pastors go wrong, because some pastors just won't do it. They won't allow themselves to do it. And I think there are a few reasons why. The first reason why is what I call the I work hard and that makes me better than most lazy pastors. That attitude. Now, I get this because if you've been in ministry for any length of time, you have been around people who are in ministry and they do the absolute bare minimum. They're just plain lazy. And I don't have much respect for those kinds of pastors because I think they're wasting their church's money. So I get it if you have somewhat of a disdain for laziness and you don't want that in yourself. When I was growing up, in my house, the worst thing you could be was lazy. Like hard work was rewarded. It's probably why I'm a 3 on Enneagram, because work was so rewarded that I want to accomplish and achieve and perform. So I totally understand this tension. And one of the things that I have often felt is that a lot of the books that are about how to avoid burnout as a pastor are written by guys who worked extraordinarily hard because they were so driven. They grew a large church and then they burned out. And now they're saying, hey, take it easy, relax, don't work so hard. And those books are being read by pastors who are like, cool, I'll be lazy and not work so hard, and I'll just go back to doing what I normally do, which is nothing. So I totally understand if your posture is one that says, I don't want to be like those lazy pastors. People already think we don't do anything. Maybe you feel a tinge of guilt because you're asking volunteers to work their full-time job and then come volunteer at the church for another set of hours every week. And so you're going, gosh, if I take time off and I'm the one that's getting paid, what is that going to communicate to those people? So I totally understand this objection. However, I want you to understand how vital it is for you to get past this. This is something that I've had to get past in my life as well, because it's important to me to be perceived as a hard worker. And at the same time, I have to realize that if I want to be in this for the long haul, I can't be so concerned about what everybody thinks of me that I just run myself into the ground just to prove something. At what cost? That I can work more than everybody else? That's always going to end in either someone else is going to work harder and I'm going to feel bad, or I'm going to burn out and I'm not going to be there for my family or my church, which is not a good place to be. So if this is where you are, just understand that if this is your tendency, then that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. It actually comes from a good place. You want to be a hard worker, but just understand how detrimental that can be if left unchecked. The next objection people have to ever taking a break is the Superman syndrome. And this is where, for a lot of pastors, we just think, hey, if I'm not there, everything's going to just fall apart. They need me. These people need me. This church needs me. The volunteers need me. Every Sunday needs me. I have to be there. I have to be performing at my highest. Like, everybody's just going to fall apart if I'm not there and I don't come in and save the day. And it's simply not true. And by the way, if it is true, it just means that you need to work on your leadership and delegate, build systems so that your church isn't people dependent or person dependent, but systems dependent. That's far better than just, if I don't show up, then everything falls apart. That is a really scary place to be, and it puts way too much pressure on you as the pastor, because then what happens if you got hit by a bus anyway? If you died, then the whole thing would fall apart, much less take a day off. So if you've got Superman syndrome, you really have to realize also, not only do you maybe need to do a better job of leading, which we all can. I'm not trying to be on my high horse here. Every single one of us can work on our leadership, myself included. But in addition to that, it also positions you, if you're not careful, as somewhat of a Christ, as a Jesus, right? Like Jesus is the one who your people need, not you, okay? You're the one who gets to kind of shepherd them and lead them along the path towards following Jesus, but at the end of the day, you're not Jesus. And so to position yourself like, I have to come save the day, you're really kind of purporting to be like the Messiah, and you're just not, and neither am I. And you can find a lot of rest in that once you realize, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. I'm not Jesus, and that's okay. A few more excuses might be things like this. I can't, right? I can't take a day off because fill in the blank. Or I'm bivocational, so what am I going to do with my other job? I never get 2 times in a row. Or I'm the only one on staff. Or this is what these people expect of me, and I just have to do it. And on and on and on and on it goes. And typically when this is the case, we often make excuses that are not really there because we just are comfortable in the patterns that we're in and we don't want to change our situation truly. And I just want to encourage you to take a step back and say, is this really healthy? And could I sacrifice something? Could I give something up? Could I just put my foot down and say, no, I'm not going to do that because I've got to do better for my family, for my health, for my longevity, because I want to be able to serve this church for a long time, and I'm not going to be able to do that if I never get a break. So whatever it is for you, you just have to kind of think about, are all these excuses stacked up enough to just give up and just say, well, this is just the way it is, and I'm just going to work myself into the ground until one day I can't do it anymore? That's not really a good place to be. So my hope is that you will consider the reasons why it's so important to take a break. And I think that there's really one main reason why we all should. And that is because God modeled this. I mean, think about the creation account. That God created all that there is, and man and beast and heavens and earth and all that. And then on the 7th day, he rested. Was God tired? No. And by the way, I'm sure you've probably taught this at one point, right? And yet, as pastors, we kind of don't think about this that much, that God himself rested and modeled the pattern of 6 days of work and 1 day of rest. And so that's a good place to start, is just, if the God of the universe, who doesn't need to rest, decided to rest, to set an example for his people, and then he commanded it in the 10 Commandments to keep the Sabbath, to keep a day of rest where you are dependent on God and not dependent on yourself, that you're demonstrating your dependence on God so that you can rest, but also so that you can say, God is my provider, not me. And so God is the provider of this church. God is the shepherd of these people. And so I'm not going to kill myself every single day of the week. I'm going to take 1 day and set it aside to depend on God and let him do what he's going to do. So that's the spiritual purpose, but then also just your family needs you. I think there's so many pastors throughout, especially, this is a common thing, at least it was a common thing back in the day, where pastors would burn themselves out and their families would grow up essentially missing out on their dad, right? I can tell you how many pastors' kids I know who talk about what it was like growing up, and they say, we came home from every vacation. My dad had to leave early from every soccer game or whatever because there was always some emergency, and he always had to be the one to respond. And so it can really wear on your family, and so your family needs you. One of the things that Andy Stanley says is that don't give up what's unique to you for something someone else will do. Someone else will eventually pastor your church. Someone else will eventually be the youth pastor at your church. Someone else will eventually lead that small group. Someone else will eventually lead that church. No one else is going to be the dad of your kid when your kid's 7 or 4 or 8 or 9. It's never going to happen. No one else is going to be your kid's mom. No one else is going to be your kid's dad except for you. And so if that's something that you punt so that you can go be with a bunch of strangers in a position that, by the way, someone else will eventually take your place and do, I don't think it's worth it. And so he just says, you got to decide, you got to choose who you're going to cheat. Is it going to be the people, or is it going to be your family? Now, sometimes you don't have a choice, right? Sometimes it is your calling, it's your job, it's just what you have to do. And that's why you need to have balance and strategic balance that allows you to be fully there when you're there, and then fully with your family and present when you're taking a break, when you have that time off. And so I just want to offer 2 quick suggestions that will maybe help you to think about how can you implement this in 2020. The first thing I would say to do is to definitely communicate with the people who need to know. So your pastor, if you're not the senior pastor, definitely talk to your senior pastor. If you are the senior pastor, talk to your elders or your board or your deacon or however your church is structured, whatever body is kind of the people that you report to. Let them know that you want to be more intentional with your time that you're working and your time that you're not. And bring them into the conversation. And also with other staff that maybe report to you or work around you and with you, and then your volunteers as appropriate. You want to make sure that you communicate what you're doing once you decide what you're going to do to the people who need to know. And then if you need to get approval, you need to definitely get that. So really it comes down to 2 things. And I think these 2 things are pretty important. The first thing is have a very intentional day off every single week. Now, sometimes this is going to get interrupted and there's nothing you can do about that. But if you set a day off and you set some intentional parameters around it, you'll start to see some progress and you'll start to see a little bit less burnout. So, for example, let's say that, like a lot of pastors, your day off is Friday. Well, leading up to Friday, if you set some deadlines to where you get your sermon done by Thursday latest, you get everything that you need to get sent off for your sermon done by Thursday at the end of the day, you send whatever emails you need to send, you do the work that you need to do that week, and then you can pick it back up on Saturday if you need to, but you leave Friday open, and then the only thing that will interrupt Friday is going to be emergencies, which you can't predict and you can't control, but what you can control is when you get your sermon done, when you have certain meetings, when you make yourself available to just anyone who wants to be around you. Those kind of things you can plan and build into your week, and it may take some time, but if your work is often bleeding into your day off, like on Friday, then just start working backwards and saying, what can I do to prevent this from happening on this day? Maybe you need to give more work away. Maybe you need to do less in general. Maybe you need to scale back the church calendar. Whatever it is, work on how you're going to plan ahead on that day. The other thing I want to mention is email and text messages and things like that. So here's the thing that I have found that is super important. When you have a day off and you're spending your time with your family, for example, or you just want to relax and not be bothered and think about stuff that stresses you out, or you just want to actually have a break away from work. If you're checking your email and you get an email from work that maybe you can't deal with right there in the moment, but you're out at a movie and you just happen to check your phone and you get a push notification and you see the email and it's something that causes you a little bit of anxiety because in that moment you can't deal with it. Well, now what has happened is even though physically you're at a movie with your family, your attention is elsewhere. You're not really focused on the movie. You're not really focused on your family. You're not really in the moment with them. You're worried about this situation that you wouldn't know about had you not checked. And had you not checked and you didn't know about it, would it matter? No, you can't deal with it anyway. So why give it your attention? That's limited and needs to be focused on your family in the moment anyway. So I would just say if you can limit push notifications, email, and then if you need to check, then set the time that you're going to check and do it once during the day or do it at the end of the day. Just be intentional and make sure that you only check when you have time to actually kind of go through and work through the emails that you've got. And then finally, the next thing is to make sure that you actually get some vacations and that your vacations are true vacations. I had a friend that I used to work with who would go on vacation and essentially work the whole time he was on vacation. And then he would come back and remark about how he went on, quote, vacation. And he would say it like that. I went on, quote, vacation. And he was trying to say, I went on vacation, but I worked the whole time, so it was miserable and I'm not rested. And I remember asking him, is that really the best thing to do? Is that going to help you come back and be energized and refreshed and ready to go if you just take your work with you and be stressed on vacation versus be stressed in the office? You might as well just stay in the office if that's what you're going to do. And so I think when we go on vacation, we need to plan for it ahead of time. A few things that really help me. Number one is when I go on a vacation, I plan ahead and I plan for any contingencies. So anybody that's dependent on me for anything, any deadlines that are going to happen, anybody who needs to have any piece of information or clarity or anything from me, I really try to do it ahead of time. Anything I can think of. And so it's kind of a joke because when I go on vacation, I'll send out 15 emails the day before I go on vacation, like, hey, you're going to need this, or here's the answer to that, or whatever, because I want to just close as many loops as I can so that everybody has the information they need. And then I also want to make sure that anybody around me can deal with things that might come up when I'm gone. So the only thing that reaches me when I'm on vacation are things that I truly need to deal with because they truly are emergencies and things that only I can attend to. I also do as much work as I can to close any open loops. An open loop is something that David Allen identifies in his book, Getting Things Done, as something that's kind of in your brain that you can't deal with yet or you haven't dealt with it, but your brain's trying to hold it there and remember it, and it's very stressful. So when it comes to open loops, I just try to make sure that anything that is like a question in my mind or something that I'm not sure of, I want to make sure that I settle that before I go. And then finally, I set specific times to check email. It's very unrealistic at this point and in most professional careers to go 7 or 8 days and not check email at all. What I try to do is be intentional about when I check and how I check. I want to check at specific times that I've predetermined, and I want to have enough time to deal with whatever I need to deal with and then move on. And so in a typical maybe 5-6 day vacation, I'll probably check email 2 times, a couple days into the vacation and then towards the end. So maybe day 2 or 3 and then day 5. And what that does is it gives me a break at the beginning, but then I can address whatever might be happening in the moment. And then right before I get back, I'm able to look and see. And the best thing in the world is when you check your email and there's really nothing that you need to deal with and you can move on. That's awesome. But if you do check your email and there's something that you need to deal with, you can deal with it right away. And then you're not wondering what's going on and what's happening that I don't know about or maybe I should know about. That's just the system that's worked for me. Maybe you have a better one, and I would love to hear from you in the comments. So I just wanted to make this video to say that as pastors, we have a tremendously important calling. It's one that I honor. It's one of the reasons why I want to spend so much time trying to serve pastors and help pastors and encourage pastors who preach and who lead, because this is important to me, that churches are healthy and that leaders are vibrant and can bring their best every single day. And so my hope for you is that if there's any encouragement in this video that you can take and say, hey, I want to be better at being there for my family, and I want to be better at taking breaks for myself so that I can bring my best for the long haul, then this will have been a success. I just want to say also that 2019 has been the best year so far for Preaching Donkey. Early this year, I released my second book, Become a Preaching Ninja, which is now available in audio format. And we released Killer Sermons Academy back in October. I'm super excited about that. It's just been awesome. The YouTube channel, this is the 50th video that we've published on the channel. I can't even believe that. It's crazy. 50 videos. And when we started the year, I think I had maybe 200 subscribers at the beginning of 2019. We now have about 3,580 or 3,582 or something like that. It's kind of crazy. I'm so excited about that. It's awesome to have you with us. If you're kind of new to Preaching Donkey, we've actually been around for 5 years, but in a lot of ways, I feel like we're just getting started. And that's really because of you. There's just been a new energy of people who have latched on to these videos and latched on to these resources and been so encouraging to let me know how they're helping you and how you're getting better in your leading and your preaching and the way you prepare sermons, deliver sermons, the way that you approach your sermon writing and sermon delivery. I just am so excited about that. So I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. I got a lot of amazing things planned for us in 2020, and I can't wait to get started on that. But just to end the year, I wanted to give you this, and I hope that this is encouragement to you. All of us need a break, and that includes you. The world's not going to fall apart if you take a day off or have a real vacation. And so I hope that these last couple of days of the year that you'll be able to do that for yourself and for your family. And then in 2020, you can build in the type of breaks and downtime that you need to keep giving it your best. That's it for today. Remember, you can get your free guide at preachingdonkey.com/21days, and I will see you in 2020 in the next video.